They claim that history is an unnecessary field of study, filled with dry dates, complex names, and tedious descriptions of equally boring events. They argue that all of it is completely useless and fails to ignite any interest. However, if we reflect on it honestly, we must admit that there is much more to history than what is found in textbooks. There is a vast expanse of human history hidden within those pages, waiting to be explored. In the next few minutes, we invite you to join us in a small experiment. Let's try to tell the story of our planet from an unusual perspective. We eagerly await your opinions and comments on whether we have succeeded in proving that history is indeed fascinating. But before we delve into the topic, let's start with the organ that allows you to enjoy this video: the eyes. The eyes are the most vital part of the human body, and they are crucial for almost all living beings on Earth. However, for 86% of its history, life on Earth existed without the presence of eyes. The first primitive form of eyes, known as proto-eyes or trilobite eyes, emerged around 600 million years ago with the appearance of trilobites, a family of ancient marine creatures. Trilobites varied in size from a few millimeters to nearly a meter, and they marked the beginning of the fascinating and complex history of eyes on Earth. Over the course of almost 4 billion years, the ability to see evolved independently in various species, following different paths of development. It was as if someone had said, "Let there be light," and suddenly, creatures all over the planet began to see. The emergence of eyes provided the early predators, like trilobites, with a decisive advantage, making them the apex predators of their time. Thus, vision became one of the most important senses and arguably the most remarkable one. Some may argue that history is unnecessary because human life is too short to experience the long-lasting effects of ancient events and processes. They might claim that it is more practical to focus on the present and immediate future. However, a simple trip to Australia could reveal the fallacy of this viewpoint. Australia, known for its unique wildlife and occasional GPS inconveniences, presents a perfect example. Due to the continent's constant tectonic movement, GPS systems periodically provide incorrect information, causing difficulties for navigation. This situation was particularly challenging just 30 years ago. Australia's movement relative to the rest of the planet affects latitude and longitude readings. In 1994, Australia's coordinates were adjusted by 199 meters, and since then, it has moved an additional 2 meters. Imagine the inconvenience of relying on an autopilot in a newfangled Tesla that constantly misjudges your position by 2 meters, or the impact of a farmer's sprinkler system watering the nearby weeds instead of the potatoes, resulting in a tenfold increase in food prices. Nature decided that Australians needed more than just crocodiles. It threw them this additional challenge. Consequently, scientists and experts need to dive into history to understand the movements of continents, studying their past and predicting their future positions. While these changes might seem inconsequential in our daily lives, they are fundamental processes that have occurred over billions of years. One of the main stereotypes about history is that most mythical stories are nothing more than tales with no factual basis. Take, for instance, the concept of killer waves. Known by various names like rogue waves or villain waves, these massive, unpredictable waves have been the subject of many stories and legends. Christopher Columbus, in his letter to the Catholic monarchs Isabella and Ferdinand, mentioned encountering a colossal and isolated wave off the island of Trinidad during his third voyage to America. In the USA, they are called the waves of robbers, in France the waves of the villain, but the essence is the same everywhere, and the story begins with Christopher Columbus in the written Catholic Corporation of Isabella and Ferdinand, reporting on the increased expedition to America. Columbus mentioned, and absolutely lonely at night the crew heard a strange roar and saw coverage with a spaceship, which moves in their consideration. And if it's stormy on all sides, then the wave goes with a clearly pronounced front. And if we are talking about ships, the trip to the New World was wildly difficult. So guys like Columbus are exaggerated. Everything that is possible and gold is marked there by wagons, and international backward and mobile sailors disappeared exceptionally exceptional in the name of the crown. The truth cannot cope with shorter non-devils. The killers were painfully similar to the coverage of tales of sailors from the category of krakens, swinging from mouth to mouth for several centuries and acquiring all the chilling details by the 20th century when, probably, like a lost technological breakthrough detection, it was still not clear that the legend went to scrap with the Flying Dutchman, and that Ryan Gosling did not die at the end of the drive. 10-11 meter out of nowhere. None of the other waves in the rough seas next to it exceeded 10-11 meter. So in January 95, half a millennium after Colombo, the story of the waves suddenly became real killer waves out of nowhere. Just occurs more irony that the explanation of this phenomenon science is still not able to have multi-purpose theories, but the most effective history of the first task of physics, which were in all descriptions of killer waves before, were considered legends and did not really even check with the crews and marine bikes who wrote everything on April 12, 1966. It was the killer wave of a giant 20-meter waves described the survivors in detail. We note that she was alone to what happened. Of course, no one listened. The U.S. Navy wrote Mapo in 1933, and this wave was already 34 meters high, if that is higher than a 9-story building, and, therefore, due to the discharge of myths with a history of using killer waves turned into a scientific phenomenon, which no longer argues. 000 years ago on Earth walked at least different types of man. It is important to understand that we are talking about the types of Neanderthals, Denisovsky man, Heidelberg man, and other features of Homo sapiens into 6 spots over 5 years, of which the planet lost its share, with others very completely underdeveloped. You can't call them Neanderthals, an understood chemical divorce of manganese dioxide and Denisovan people. 250 to 300,000 years ago, various types of people on the planet generally mated with everyone in a row. In general, there were more than a dozen. And 2 million years ago, the number of Homo and other humanoid species was a consequence of the fact that initially our ancestors were present in conditions with Australopithecus and all sorts of paranthropes, and then staged a battle of the piano with a dozen branches of development continued ridiculously even by modern standards of time 50,000 years ago. Works of art were already created, the first proto-cities and languages, and now it would be an enlightened time. Our species would still find itself in the millstones of evolutionary meat cutting, although for 86% history has not met. This was not available until new meetings with friends,